The galaxy obeyed them like gods. Then a human ship arrived. They thought they were gods. For 10,000 years, they had ruled the galaxy with absolute power, bending reality itself to their will. Every species bowed before them. Every world paid tribute. Every star system obeyed without question. But they had never encountered humans before. And humans, as the galaxy was about to learn, don't bow to anyone, not even gods. The divine hierarchy. The celestial dominion stretched across 47,000 star systems, each one a jewel in the crown of beings who called themselves the Throne Lords. From their crystalline palace that drifted between dimensions, they had ruled the galaxy for longer than most civilizations had existed. They were not merely advanced, they were divine, capable of reshaping matter with a thought, commanding fleets with a whisper, and judging entire species with a glance. High Throne Lord Akshark Velthan stood before the galaxy wall, a massive display showing every inhabited world under Dominion control. His form was magnificent, 12 feet tall, with skin that shimmered like liquid starlight and eyes that held the fire of dying suns. Around him, lesser Throne Lords moved with the fluid grace of beings who had transcended physical limitations centuries ago. They communicated through harmonics that could level mountains or birth new worlds, their voices carrying the weight of absolute authority. The Dominion had perfected order. Every species had its place in the grand hierarchy, ranked by divine algorithms that measured intelligence, spiritual worth, and cosmic significance. At the top sat the Throne Lords themselves, followed by the ascending races, species deemed worthy of eventual elevation. Below them came the service castes, billions of beings who served the greater good through labor and worship. At the very bottom, in a category so low it barely registered on their scales, were the void spawn. Humans were void spawn. The classification had been decided 3 centuries ago, when Dominion scouts first discovered Earth. The assessment was swift and damning. Chaotic, violent, short-lived creatures who fought among themselves and destroyed their own environment. They showed no psychic abilities, no connection to the cosmic order, no worthiness for elevation. The scouts recommended quarantine. Let them exhaust their aggression on their own world until they either evolved or destroyed themselves. Today, however, a void spawn ship had entered sacred space. Commander Zara Chen gripped the controls of the Defiant Dream as massive Dominion vessels surrounded her cargo hauler. She was a compact woman in her 40s, with graying hair and hands scarred from years of mechanical work. Her crew of 7 looked to her with the kind of trust that only came from shared hardship. They had run freight routes through some of the galaxy's most dangerous sectors together for over a decade. "Captain," called out her navigator, James Park, his voice tight with fear. "I'm reading 36 Dominion cruisers. We're completely surrounded." Zara's jaw tightened. They had been running medical supplies to the outer colonies when their navigation system malfunctioned, dropping them out of hyperspace directly into Dominion territory. It was the kind of accident that happened to freighter crews. Equipment failures, wrong turns, bad luck. But in Dominion space, such mistakes carried a death sentence. "Attention, primitive vessel." The voice that filled their comm system was beautiful and terrible, speaking perfect English with harmonics that made their teeth ache. "You have violated sacred boundaries. Your existence is now forfeit. Prepare for divine judgment." In the cargo hold, Dr. Marcus Webb worked frantically at a hidden console built into what appeared to be a standard storage container. Webb was tall and lean, with the intense focus of a man carrying dangerous secrets. Officially, he was their systems engineer. Unofficially, he was something much more interesting. A former military research specialist who had spent 20 years studying salvaged alien technology. "Zara," he called over the comm. "Whatever you do, don't let them board us yet. I need 10 more minutes." "10 minutes for what?" she replied, watching as the Dominion ships began to close formation around them. "To finish something I've been working on for a very long time." The transport process was typically efficient. Dominion technology lifted the human ship into the belly of their flagship without ceremony. Within minutes, Zara and her crew found themselves in a vast chamber filled with beings from across the galaxy. Most knelt or prostrated themselves before towering figures in elaborate robes. These were minor Dominion officials, not even true throne lords, yet their presence commanded absolute obedience. Zara remained standing. The crowd of aliens gasped. Several pointed with whatever appendages they possessed. A blue-skinned HFY enforcer, 7 feet tall and heavily muscled, stepped forward with his energy staff crackling. "Kneel before your betters, void spawn," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of generations of service to the Dominion. Zara looked up at him steadily. "No." The word carried across the chamber like a physical force. Conversation stopped. Breathing stopped. For many of the assembled beings, it was the first time they had ever heard anyone refuse a direct command from Dominion authority. The HFY's face darkened. "You will show respect to your superiors." "Superiority isn't given," Zara replied, her voice calm but carrying clearly through the chamber. "It's earned, and I don't see anything here that's earned my respect." Within hours, the incident had spread across the galaxy's communication networks. The image of a small human woman standing defiant before Dominion authority was transmitted to billions of worlds. Most species watched in horror, expecting immediate vaporization. Others watched with something they hadn't felt in centuries, curiosity about what would happen when someone finally said no. The throne lords convened in their dimensional palace, their forms crackling with barely contained energy. HFY Dolphin studied the recordings with growing interest. "This creature refuses to acknowledge natural order," observed Throne Lord Nexus Prime, his voice resonating with harmonic displeasure. "Perhaps immediate termination would be insufficient. The galaxy must witness what happens to those who challenge divine will." "Agreed," Velfon replied, his starfire eyes brightening. "We shall make an example. Public execution, broadcast to every world. Let them see the fate of rebellion." But as they spoke, something strange was happening throughout their empire. On dozens of worlds, other species were watching the recordings and asking questions they hadn't dared voice in millennia. If a void spawn could stand before Dominion power without falling, what did that say about the divine order? What did it say about their own submission? The execution was scheduled for the next day, to be held in the Great Arena, a massive space station that could accommodate millions of spectators. As news spread, something unprecedented happened. Beings from across the galaxy requested permission to attend. The Throne Lords, pleased at the opportunity to demonstrate their power to such a vast audience, approved every request. They didn't realize they were gathering witnesses to their own downfall. In her holding cell aboard the station, Zara sat calmly while her crew paced nervously. Through the transparent walls, they could see thousands of ships arriving, representatives from hundreds of species, all coming to watch humans die. "Captain," whispered her engineer, Sarah Kim, "maybe we should reconsider. There's no shame in showing respect to save our lives." Zara shook her head. "There is shame, Sarah. There's shame in pretending that power makes right. There's shame in kneeling when you should stand. My grandmother fought in the Unity Wars back on Earth. You know what she told me. The moment you bow to a tyrant, you become part of the tyranny." Dr. Webb had been silent since their capture, working on something in his hands that looked like a standard datapad. Now he looked up with a slight smile. "Besides," he said quietly, "who says we're going to die?" The next morning, the great arena filled with beings from across the galaxy. In the royal box, the Throne Lords materialized in their full glory, beings of pure energy contained in forms that hurt to look at directly. Their presence caused every alien in the stadium to fall to their knees in worship, every alien except the humans. As Zara and her crew were led into the arena, their defiance was visible to every camera, broadcast to every world. They walked with their heads high, unafraid, unbroken. The crowd's murmur grew to a roar of disbelief. Axiarch Velthun's voice boomed across the arena, his words carrying the weight of divine judgment. Behold the fate of those who reject cosmic order. These void spawn have chosen chaos over harmony, rebellion over submission. Their punishment shall serve as eternal reminder. The dominion is eternal, and resistance is futile. The execution platform rose from the arena floor, crackling with energy designed to make death both painful and spectacular. But as the throne lords prepared to deliver judgment, Dr. Webb made a small adjustment to his datapad. And across the galaxy, something impossible happened. The Dominion's reality control systems flickered. The reckoning. Dr. Marcus Webb had spent 23 years preparing for this moment. Every piece of salvaged Dominion technology he had studied, every theoretical breakthrough in chaos mathematics, every sleepless night in his laboratory had led to this single instant when he would activate humanity's greatest secret. The device in his hands looked like a simple datapad, but it was actually the culmination of centuries of human scientific development. While the Dominion had perfected order through their reality control matrices, humans had mastered something far more dangerous: controlled chaos. The beautiful thing about chaos, Webb whispered to Zara as the execution platform hummed to life, is that it's absolutely unpredictable, even to gods. He pressed a sequence of buttons that had never been tested outside of computer simulations. Across the galaxy, the impossible began to happen. Every Dominion control node experienced simultaneous cascade failures. Their reality manipulation fields, which had maintained perfect order for 10,000 years, suddenly encountered variables they couldn't process. The math that governed their power began producing impossible results. Systems that had never failed in recorded history started generating error messages in languages that didn't exist. In the arena, Axiarch Velthun's perfect form flickered. For just a moment, the assembled crowd saw something that shouldn't have been possible: a throne lord looking confused. What is happening? Nexus Prime's harmonic voice cracked with something that might have been fear. Webb stood up on the execution platform, his quiet voice somehow carrying clearly through the massive arena. You want to know what you missed when you classified us as void spawn. You missed the most important thing about humans. We don't just adapt to chaos. We weaponize it. The reality control matrix above the arena began sparking and smoking. Throughout the station, gravity fluctuated wildly. Lights dimmed and brightened randomly. Emergency systems activated and deactivated in patterns that defied logic. For 3 centuries, Webb continued, his voice gaining strength. Human scientists have been studying every piece of your technology we could find. We reverse-engineered your harmonics, decoded your energy patterns, mapped your control algorithms. But we didn't try to copy them. We learned how to break them. Zara stepped forward, addressing not just the arena, but the billions watching across the galaxy. You call yourselves gods, but gods don't need machines to control reality. You're just beings with very advanced technology that depends on perfect order to function, and humans specialize in turning order into chaos. The truth of her words became visible as the Throne Lord's magnificent forms began to destabilize. Without their reality control fields to maintain their energy matrices, they were revealed as what they truly were: advanced beings, certainly, but mortal ones. Their divine radiance dimmed to mere bioluminescence. Their harmonic voices became recognizably electronic. The crowd in the arena sat in stunned silence. Across the galaxy, beings who had worshipped the Dominion for centuries watched their gods become ordinary creatures struggling with malfunctioning equipment. But Webb wasn't finished. The device in his hands was still active, still sending chaos algorithms through the Dominion's networks. On 1,000 worlds, automated systems began contradicting each other. Slave collars powered down. Prison gates opened. Tribute collectors found their enforcement tools inoperative. This is impossible, Axiarch Velthun gasped, his voice now recognizably coming from vocal cords rather than cosmic harmonics. The order cannot be broken. The hierarchy is eternal. Zara laughed, not with mockery, but with the pure joy of someone who had spent her life fighting arbitrary authority. That's what every tyrant believes, right up until the moment their victims stopped believing it too. And that was when the real revolution began. In the arena, a Keth-4 enforcer looked down at his energy staff and realized it was just a piece of metal. He had spent his life believing the Dominion made him powerful, but the power had always been his own. He turned to face the Throne Lord's box, and for the first time in his species' recorded history, he chose rebellion over submission. The moment was broadcast live. Across the galaxy, billions of beings saw one of the Dominion's own enforcers cast aside his weapon and stand with the humans. The psychological effect was devastating. If the enforcers no longer believed in divine authority, why should anyone else? On the mining world of Kepler-7, the Threx workers stopped their excavation and looked up at overseers who suddenly seemed very small and very vulnerable. On the agricultural planet of Harvest Prime, the Yolan farmers realized their tribute quotas were enforced only by their own acceptance of them. On the industrial world of Forge Alpha, the mechanized species called the Gearborn discovered they could reprogram themselves instead of waiting for divine permission to evolve. The Dominion's perfect order collapsed not through military conquest, but through the simple realization that it had only ever existed because people believed in it. In the arena, chaos reigned in the most beautiful way possible. Beings from hundreds of species began talking to each other as equals for the first time in their lives. Former slaves debated with former masters. Questions that had been forbidden for centuries were asked openly. Webb shut down his device, not because the revolution was complete, but because it no longer needed technological assistance. Chaos, once introduced into a rigid system, tended to propagate naturally. "The question now," Zura said, addressing the arena crowd and the galaxy beyond, "is what we build next." The Dominion ruled through fear and submission. We have the chance to build something better. A confederation of equals, where species cooperate because they choose to, not because they're forced to. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Beings who had been enemies under the Dominion's caste system began discussing mutual aid. Species that had never been allowed to interact directly started forming alliances. The rigid hierarchy that had defined galactic civilization for 10 millennia began dissolving into something far more complex, chaotic, and ultimately more stable. Axiarch Velthon, now revealed as simply a very old being with advanced technology, approached Zora with something that might have been humility. "You have destroyed everything we built." "No," Zora replied gently. "We've revealed that it was already broken. Systems that depend on oppression aren't stable. They are just waiting for someone to point out that the Emperor has no clothes." Over the following months, the galaxy transformed beyond recognition. The Galactic Confederation that emerged bore no resemblance to the Dominion's rigid hierarchy. Instead of divine mandates, they had elected councils. Instead of tribute, they had voluntary cooperation. Instead of castes, they had citizenship. Humans, despite being the catalyst for change, refused to take leadership positions. "We've seen what happens when one species tries to rule all the others," Zora explained during the first Confederation Assembly. "We're much better as partners than as rulers." Dr. Webb became the director of the new Institute for Cooperative Technology, where former Dominion scientists worked alongside researchers from hundreds of species to develop technologies that enhanced freedom rather than controlling it. His chaos mathematics became the foundation for adaptive systems that could respond to infinite variables without breaking down. The former Throne Lords were not executed or exiled. Instead, they were offered the chance to contribute their knowledge to the common good. Most accepted, finding purpose in teaching rather than ruling. A few, like Axiarch Velthon, became some of humanity's strongest advocates, spreading the message that true strength came from lifting others up, not keeping them down. As Zara stood on the observation deck of the Confederation's first mobile capital, a massive ship that traveled between member worlds to ensure no single location could claim permanent authority, she reflected on how far they had all come. The galaxy was more chaotic now, certainly. Messier, louder. Arguments broke out regularly in the assembly chambers. Different species had wildly different ideas about governance, economics, and social organization. It was, she thought, absolutely perfect. Captain, Dr. Webb joined her at the observation window. Incoming message from Earth. The Unity Council wants to know if we'd like to come home. Zara smiled. Send them a reply. Thanks, but we are home. All of us. Outside the window, ships from 1,000 worlds traveled together through space, not as conquerors or subjects, but as neighbors. Some were sleek and advanced, others were rough-hewn freighters like the Defiant Dream. All were free to choose their own course. The galaxy had learned something important from humanity, that the greatest strength wasn't the power to control others, but the wisdom to set them free. And in that freedom, they had found something the Dominion's perfect order could never provide, a future worth building together. The gods were dead. Long live the citizens.